Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
Let's get perked up, everybody, and let's roll. I'm Catherine White, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, amplifying the voice of the grassroots to get things done. And yes, to make politics fun. Today, our team is super excited to bring you the theme of our show today, art spaces to state races, the power of working together. So we're going to have just such a great discussion about that intersection of art and activism with Ken Grossinger, author, organizer, and strategist and consultant. He is just going to be fantastic bringing this information to us. And also, we talk about state races and how we actually work together to win in Virginia. We are so pleased to have Heather Williams with us. She's the interim director of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. Like a lot of people just call it DLCC, which is a lot easier. Anyways, and then we're very excited to welcome in Delegate Kathy Tran, who was elected again in House District 18. Woohoo! Great to have Kathy. We go back many, many years to when she first ran. And so we're so pleased that she's now the Democratic Caucus Chair. And we're going to be talking about all the legislative stuff that's coming up. And a lot of you in the room, I know, I see you. You're already organizing to go down for Lobby Day and get behind the legislation, the legislation that moves you. Because truthfully, this is what this is about, right? We elect people because they move our issues, and that's important. So if you're new to the room, welcome. You're on a badass show with a bunch of great women that love to bring you great information, but we do have rules of the road. Use the chat, spread the good news about what you're working on, where you're from, but please do not use it to get into nasty fights. If you do, we'll just kick you out. We're good at that. We like to do that. And then also after chat, stick around. Past 1 p.m., this is where it all happens, where actually really great conversations happen. We unmute and everybody gets to share and talk. And sometimes we're lucky enough that our guests stick around also. So we hope you can stick around for the after chat. And lastly, if you're a patron, yay, thank you for supporting us all year. A new year is coming up. Why not invest in us and renew? And thank you. I think Rose Fabia renewed her subscription as a patron. Thank you so much. It really, really, really helps us do our work. And we are just obviously great to invest in. In fact, we're going to a work retreat this weekend where we will be planning next year's season and get ready for that. So hold on to your hats. Lastly, let's just say that we want to bring up Fennell so we could talk swag.
All right.
Let's bring her up because let's talk about what we got on. Fennell, turkey, gobble, gobble. How are you?
Here I am. I know. Isn't this pretty wonderful?
I know. See this? We voted. We won for democracy. So I want to show everybody our swag store because we want everybody in Virginia wearing the swag, and because it's really cool. Here it is, and I have my mug. Check that out. And I can tell you right now that I love it, and everybody in my house wants to drink out of it.
Yeah, and I love my shirt. I love my sweatshirt, and we're going to talk to Ken later on. But remember that these are great conversation starters, and so you can actually have a message without having to say a word. Yeah.
I agree. And I think, we are pushing our swag for one reason. We find that it is the power of working together. And when we go out and knock doors and we have kind of this nonpartisan stuff on, it really gets the conversation going. And you'll see, there'll be a lot of pictures and a lot of activists wearing this kind of gear, and it's super. So thank you for that. Look how good. Well, the whole team has it on today. So let's just get talking about, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And I did. Is your pants a little tight, or are you okay? Were you overdue?
Well, I always overdo on Thanksgiving, It's probably macaroni and cheese is my thing. And yeah, so I overdo,
yes.
but it's okay. I don't care at all.
Yeah, I know we're going away to a retreat, and I think on the list was like a loose pants, which are really good. So that's great. Well, I wanted to say about some of the work we're talking about today. Some things we want to note are women of consequence and substance. We have some views. Want to talk about that?
Yeah, we do. And I want to start. I know you can talk about Sandra Day O'Connor, but I want to talk about Rosalind Carter. And I have to say that when I've been sort of listening and reading about her all this week, I had no idea of what her contributions were and how engaged she was with President Carter. Mm-hmm. And I was just flabbergasted and a little bit embarrassed that I didn't know how much she influenced mental health and just the work that she did from day one until the end. So I'm just thrilled that I know about her now. And I mean, she should be an inspiration for us all. And quite frankly, when I listened to the love letter that President Carter wrote to her, I don't know how many years ago when he was away, I think we all should aspire for that kind of relationship and for someone to love you just that much.
Love you that long. And I think when he was asked about what he was most proud of or about being his whole life, it was he mentioned the relationship, his partnership with Rosalind. And I love it that for me, just watching that modeling of the integrity and really living the authentic life, and that was the NPR word today, was authentic life of really caring about people. We need more of that. There's so much, as the song John Legend said, so much war, so much poverty, so much still homelessness. I mean, we see the conflicts going on, and it's really why we can't stop. As Rosalind said, we cannot stop, don't stop. We have to continue fighting for the things that are important. So yeah, Sandra Day O'Connor, a lot to say. I mean, first woman on the court, and just amazing that she gave her life to just doing so many great things on the court and then quit to take care of her husband. That was amazing too, that the relationship and how much that matters. So we want to make sure that we start the day with some good stuff. And also, let's celebrate. Santos got expelled. How about that? Let's switch over to badass shit. Okay, how long? It just took too damn long though, but they did kick it out. So
9 months and he finally got kicked out. And I think that what I learned from listening to him is just the gall. I mean, he was just talking like someone, like he was the person who had been, all of these things had happened to him. He was the one who was assaulted, and he can't believe this is happening. I just think, wow, to have that kind of privilege is kind of amazing. And so, I mean, we just have to add some more badassedness to what we do. Because, I mean, honestly, if he could do that with the kind of person he was, we are obviously selling ourselves way short.
Yeah. 9 months and a baby's gone. Bye-bye. Birth the baby out of, so amazing. And I'm sure that Susan Wagner's here. We were talking about New York and Long Island. A lot of work we got to do in Long Island, and we're going to be working with democracy markers and working together. So speaking of working together, I would think that we just need to get right to business if you want, and bring up Kathy Tran and let's talk about working together. Kathy Tran, Delegate House District 18, and also now elevated to the Democratic Caucus Chair. How's that feel?
It's awesome. It's so great to just help me lead this incredible Democratic majority again. I'm really excited. Love working with my colleagues, and I love our new freshman class too, which is they're pretty amazing, as you all know.
Well, we're excited. We'll be down on your first day in the room. A lot of people are planning January 10th and 11th to go down and open and welcome the General Assembly. I mean, it's that breathing space. We have a little bit of breathing space, right? It was a tough year, a little bit of worry, right? But we made it over the finish line. And this is important because what we want to talk about today is, again, elections are about legislation. I mean, they're just not about having this. Why do we do this, right?
Well, I think elections are about our values, and the legislation reflects our values, right? That's a way for us to put forward how we want to make a better future for our kids and our families and our communities. And I just want to first off say thank you to the Network Nova Friday Power Lunch crew, for all you do, for everybody who comes on every week, because we would not be able to legislate our values this coming year with a Democratic majority without your hard work and support. So thank you if you were donating to campaigns, postcard writing, simply talking to neighbors about why it's important to get out the vote, because all the issues that matter the most to our communities that affect our, neighbors on a daily basis are the things that we are prioritizing this coming session. And so, as you may have seen, I'm really excited about our first 4 priority bills that the House and Senate jointly put in together. We recognize that our families are still struggling in a kind of post-COVID inflationary sense world, and we want to make sure that people are having the resources they need to take care of their families. And that starts with putting us on a pathway to $15 minimum wage here in Virginia. We passed this bill a couple of years ago when we had a Democratic majority, but we got a reenactment clause, which means we have to do it again. So we needed our Democratic majority to do it again, and that's House Bill number 1 and Senate Bill number 1 is putting us on that pathway, making sure that our vulnerable families are in a much better economic situation. And we also know kind of the devastation of gun violence in Virginia, in our communities, and across this country. So House Bill number 2 is to ban assault weapons here moving forward. And so we're really excited to be taking such a strong stance in Virginia around gun safety. And then we put in 2 constitutional amendments. They're both resolutions that are put in, and that's just the process for constitutional amendments. But our first resolution is affirming our constitutional right to reproductive freedom. And we know super clear, right?
That's super clear.
Post-Roe world, the importance of protecting our right to making these decisions about our bodies ourselves without the interference of politicians and others like that. So that is our first resolution. And the second resolution is the restoration of voting rights for returning citizens, particularly in a year where we just saw Governor Youngkin disenfranchise thousands of returning citizens in Virginia. It's really important that we are clear that establishing a fundamental right to that is a priority for us.
Can I ask a quick question about that? So before, when we had that, was it just more or less based on tradition, governor tradition, that they would, I know the Republican governor that started that, Bob McDonnell, and then Ralph Northam and Terry McAuliffe continued that, I think, really. But then it was just more based on not a really bill or the law, but just about he can basically do what he wanted with restoring these rights. So this constitutional amendment will really make it a solid, there's no question about it.
Right. Yes. So before it was, yes. So now you have a right versus before it's like the process to do it has changed and shifted, but ultimately rested with the governor.
Nice. And so how about our last one? I know we had talked, because I told you I want to push that 3 and free.
Yes.
The constitutional amendments for freedom, and how we're going to win the next couple of years talking to voters about the values you're talking about. The last one, marriage equality. Where are we on that, and what's your plan around that one?
We're really excited. We will be seeing that come forward as well. We are just there are a couple of different kind of pathways to doing that, strategies, but you will definitely see that coming as one of our top bills. And it's something we all support, ensuring that LGBTQ people can love whom they love, right? And live with dignity. And that's a key, the ability to marry whom you love is key to being able to live with dignity. But we're just kind of working through the legislative strategy, but we're firmly behind that, and you'll see that coming soon.
Yeah, especially with all that benefits you saw of tax credits for being married. We want to make sure everybody that gets those credits that are married, and it's that respect in general, that in that part, talking about this love today between people, and so important that we make sure that everybody has that equal chance. And so that is cool. So tell us a little bit about what we're kind of interested in too, is I know that we've been meeting in working groups talking about bills and all the bills that are dropping. Let's talk about your strategy and the sense of, we know that you have the majority, but you don't have the governorship and all that. So what is the strategy, and is this setting the tone, like you said, around especially this election season?
So I think it's really, as you said, we still have divided government, right? Our majority now is a little bit different in that our most recent majority, when we had a Democratic trifecta. So I think we still have to operate within those bounds. And I think what's important for us is making sure that we're intentionally and purposefully and thoughtfully protecting our rights and the progress we have made. Because you might have seen House Bill number 3, the first one that dropped on the Republican side was to repeal our clean car standards, right? And putting back, moving us backwards in terms of air pollution and air quality and climate change. And so we want to make sure that we are protecting that progress. And at the same time, looking forward and being intentional and strategic about the vision that we put forward for a brighter future for Virginia, so that people are very clear in the differences between Democrats and Republicans and what we stand for, and what we want to do better for our kids and our families. And that's also on the political side, right? An eye towards helping President Biden in his reelection, helping Senator Kaine in his reelection in 2024, but also making sure that we are positioned to win back the governorship and to retain and expand our majorities in 25. As you started off, Catherine, every year there's an election in Virginia, and so we're cognizant of that. But I think it's important to be able to put forward an affirmative vision for Virginia as well. And so I think you'll see that in all the different legislation that we're going to be putting forward. Yesterday was a super stressful day if anybody tried to reach out to legislators, because it was our bill, like our major bill drafting request deadline. So everybody was like, all the way up to 4:59 p.m. We were able to make our requests for bill drafts. We were working frantically and furiously towards doing that. And so we're going to get those bill drafts back. We're going to review them, have conversations within our respective caucuses and such. But then we'll be starting to introduce our bills soon. It's going to be exciting.
I do see, go ahead, Fennell, but I do see a question from Michael when you get a chance, Fennell, if you want to see it too.
Sure. So Delegate Tran, so just sort of congratulations again. Taking a long view, we know that you guys have done really fantastic work before. And you were talking about how we helped Tim Kaine, how do we help President Biden, all of us for 2024. And these bills are great bills. So how do you get it to resonate throughout the community so that from the bottom up, people can feel and see what they ought to be expecting so that they're excited about it and talking about it?
I think that's so good. And I think that's where kind of working with you and other grassroots leaders and also our just community members are so important, right? If we do all this good work and it stays in the chamber in Richmond, that doesn't, we want people to know the progress that we're able to make. And there's a lot of things, I think, on a bipartisan level, we're going to be able to come to, a meeting of the minds on, whether that's funding for our teachers in our schools, mental health supports, fighting the opioid crisis. There are areas where I think you'll continue to see us make progress, even in a divided government situation. But at the same time, all the things we're fighting for, right, that we're coming at loggerheads with, possibly with the governor, is making sure that we are communicating that. And so that gets back to what I was starting off by saying, is that that's where it's really important that we stay connected, that all of you know what we're doing and the work that we're trying to achieve in the General Assembly and helping us talk to our neighbors. And sometimes that's like big rallies. Sometimes it's just a simple town hall that our legislators host to get the word out about what we're doing. And so I think all of that type of communication is going to be really important. People have to know, right, what's at stake, what we're trying to achieve, and whether or not we're successful and why. And I think that's part of it, that message.
Yeah, and thank you. And one follow-up to that, and then I'll let Catherine ask Ken's question, so there are going to be some places where we don't have representation. So how do you guys, and that's going to be really important for our federal election. So how do you guys propose to sort of help those spaces where there isn't a Democrat elected, so that they don't sort of feel left out? What will that look like?
I think that gets into a couple of things, like some of our grassroots networks. Many of you on the call today might not be in a Democratic, district, right? Democratically represented district. And so you're still here and you're still able to talk to your friends and neighbors locally, right? So that people are understanding. And then sometimes, and the other one are some of our other partners, advocacy partners. I was on I was having a conversation with somebody in the environmental advocacy space, and they were saying they were having a meeting, and after that meeting, and they were talking about some of the work they wanted to do in terms of clean energy, and after that meeting, a gentleman walked up and said, I always thought that you were probably going to be a Democratic type of organization, but I understand what you're trying to do. This is really helpful, right? And so we're also going to need it to tap into our partners and other organizations who are also on the ground in places where we may not represent, to help spread the word about the work that's happening in the General Assembly.
Yeah. And Fennell's good question is based on, I know when we were a little frustrated, all the great things y'all did when you had the majority. And then it seemed like that we weren't able to, when we had the megaphone, to just to let people know, yeah, we did that. It's like so we're going to help. We definitely have some ideas around that we'll work with you on.
Yes, we need help. We did that.
Yeah, well, of course. Kathy Tran, somebody wants to ask you about is there anything in the works to repeal the right to work? We know that's been a big deal that we weren't able to pass before. Is anybody doing anything about the repealing the right to work?
I think I would just say broadly on that, and a whole host of other issues that we each may really feel strongly about. I think people have drafted, they're all drafting bills, or all those bills are like now being drafted, and then we're going to just consider things to put forward. I think sometimes, there are things that we may individually want, and we have to weigh kind of the political strategy. And I'm just going to be straight up, right? We have 50 and 21 members, and we want to make sure that our eye is on the prize, and the prize is winning back the governor's office in 2025. And so I say that as some of you might know how I voted on that issue and other issues as well. But there's some things that we may not be able to do this year or even next year, because we may not be able to get all the way through, and we want to make sure that that we're strategic. And so on any number of these issues, if we win back a governor's mansion, then we can also have another conversation. And so I just ask for that grace as y'all think about the issues you care the most about.
Because like, again, it will, where things will go and what really could pass and what's worth putting for the next 2 years until our pathway to get that whole majority there. Oh, that means it's time for us to wrap up. I love it.
I love it. You guys are so awesome. I have to say, I'm super excited. I'm helping to do some trainings with our new members, and just, helping people make the transition from candidate to legislator. And so I think some of the feedback on getting the word out about our work, on being thoughtful about our agenda, we are going to be, the strongest when we are able to work hard together, right? Inside, outside. And so I really look forward to continuing to partner with you guys to get the word out.
We are too. We're glad you're there, because we've had a long relationship, and this is where we want, like you said, really working and living our values together. So thank you so much. Yay. Enjoy the rest of your day. I know you'll be busy. Thank you, Delegate Tran. Awesome. All right.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Talk about art spaces now. And I cannot wait to talk to your conversation with Ken Grossinger. So go for it. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you. I am so excited. Ken, thank you so much for being with us today. We've had a chance to have a conversation previously. And I think that this is so important today, because it's been done, and you're going to tell us all about that, but we can do more. And so this is what your work has been about, how we drive activism and art together to sort of change economic and strategic about social things. How do we make movements? So let me give the floor to you, and let's talk a little bit. We're going to actually have a museum tour with Ken today. So why don't we get started?
So let me just first say thank you to Fennell and the Power Lunch gang for not just inviting me here today, but for the good work that you do. As you know, I've been a labor and community organizer for over 25 years, and I think that the most important thing we can be doing is the type of work that you're doing at the grassroots, not the grass tops, not institutionally, but at the very bottom in the communities. And so my heart goes out to you in thanks. And also your show, the vibe on this show is so wonderful. It's so upbeat. It's so infectious that I'm just stunned by it. I'm so delighted to be here. My book, let me take a minute to describe it, takes a look at the impact of collaboration between organizers and artists. And I do that because I want to win. And in the time that I was organizing, when I learned my craft, I never thought about or was taught to think about art and culture. And therefore, when I practiced it, I didn't include art and culture. And when I started teaching younger organizers how to think about their work, I didn't teach it. And then I married an artist. And I realized just how big a boat I missed. And it was through the work with Micheline, my wife, as we began to support work at the intersection of art and social justice, that we learned it was not just organizers who didn't think strategically about art and culture, but it was artists, many of whom did not think about their work in the service of social movements. And so it's that union that I wanted to bring together in the book.
Well, I think you've got fantastic stories. And so Robin is going to help us move the slides forward so you can sort of talk about some of these intersections. And I'll jump in when I've got something to say, but what you have to say is way more important. So I'll let you go.
The first point that I want to make is that art is not just a reflection of or a reaction to social conditions, but it's a contributor to social change. And I want to illustrate that point by looking at two slides, one historical and one contemporary, and share some stories about those. This first slide, there are not 33 girls in it, but it's meant to be a picture of 33 teenage girls who was swept up in the early 1960s at a movie theater protesting racial segregation. One of the most advanced organizations doing civil rights work at that time was SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And the head of SNCC, a guy named James Foreman, understood that if he wanted to expose the brutality of white supremacy in the South, that he needed uncontestable visual evidence. And so he started dabbling and started working with organizers around theater, around music. Some of you will remember Bernice Johnson Reagan, who helped start the Freedom Singers, was the fourth staff person that James Foreman hired, and then went on to found Sweet Honey in the Rock. Well, along this time, a bunch of volunteers streamed down to the South during the Civil Rights Movement, and one of them was a photographer, a guy named Danny Lyon. And James Foreman said to Danny, I want you to find these girls. These girls were in captivity for 45 days. Their families didn't know where they were. The communities didn't know where they were. And Foreman said, you've got to find them and take pictures of them. And so Danny went out with two civil rights workers, found the girls. The two civil rights workers distracted the guards. And Danny took a picture of these girls through broken glass and bars and brought them back to James Foreman. And James Foreman then sent them out to media outlets, including Jet Magazine and any number of other outlets. And Senator Harrison, the senator from Pennsylvania, then entered this image into the congressional record. It eventually wound up on the desk of Robert F. Kennedy, who was the Attorney General at that time. And these girls were swiftly released. So it was the idea that art was not just a reflection or a reaction to social conditions, but it was a contributor to social change.
I love this one as we go to the next one because it reminds me of Linda Hersham, where she says, make injustice public. And when you do, we can see here very clearly that change happens, as you will describe with this one.
So what you're looking at here is an image of a raven, a purple raven. Anybody know who the football team is in Maryland? It's the Baltimore Ravens. Their color is purple. And you're looking at a raven holding wood slats in its claw and caution tape around its beak, police caution tape, in an effort to symbolize the rebuilding and regathering of community and housing. And so This is a story about an artist, a guy named Justin Nethercutt, street name Nether, working in collaboration with a housing organizer, a woman named Carol Ott. They wanted to draw attention to blighted buildings. As you know, because everyone here is from Virginia or the DC area, Baltimore is one of the few last of the East Coast cities where there are rows and rows and rows, blocks and blocks of dilapidated homes, blighted. And Justin wanted to call attention to them. And so Carol Ott began to do some research about who the owners of these buildings were. And Justin assembled a team of 15 artists. And he asked me what I thought about the project. And in my most diplomatic tone, and I'm not very much of a diplomat, I said to him, well, it's good, but it's not really going to change anything. And he said, yeah, but. And the but was the QR code that you're looking at in front of the Raven's Beak. And when you scan the QR code, it brings you to the website, which pops up the name of the slumlord who owns the building. And so here's what happened. 2 days go by after this Raven and QR code goes up, and the QR code is ripped down. The mural stays intact, but the QR code is ripped down. No surprise there. Justin goes back 2 days later and puts the QR code back up. And I don't know what it takes, how long it takes to get a demolition license in Baltimore, but that building was knocked down in 2 to 3 weeks after this. And so again, it was the idea of art leading to change. And so there were 15 of these murals and 15 of these QR codes that Justin and his crew put up. And I just want to skip to the 5th mural because that really tells a lot about the story. The 5th mural is a mural by a guy named Gaia, who drew a picture of Pharaoh wearing a golden headdress. But instead of looking out over Egypt, he's looking out over a cotton plantation. And the words exile is written in Hebrew and English along the bottom. The QR code goes up and the landlord goes ballistic. Calls up the Baltimore Sun, the daily paper in Baltimore, and says, I just want you to know that this is the idea of Jews keeping down blacks in the ghetto. And number 2, I don't own this building. And the Baltimore Sun assigned 3 reporters to the project, taking a look at Justin's project of 15. And they did a 1.5-page hatchet job on it. And the Baltimore Weekly, which is the progressive alternative to the Baltimore Sun, calls up Justin for comment and then asks Justin if it's okay for them to call the Baltimore Sun reporters. And among the questions they asked was, did you just report what the landlord said, or did you research it? And so they invested their own funds into doing independent research and found out that this guy, in fact, had controlling authority of the building. And he had been cited 500 times for lead paint in previous units. And so now what you've got is a volley going on between the Baltimore Weekly and the Baltimore Sun. And every time a new mural goes up, there is more press attention because they want to know what's going to happen next. Radios, blogs, TVs, I think ABC said art aimed to shame was the headline that they used. And so this went on throughout the summer. And finally, at the end of the summer of 2013, the mayor threw up her hands and said, I've had enough of this, and invested, bumped up her budget from $2.2 million to over $22 million. So she invested an additional $20 million into the budget for demolition and renovation. So it's the idea, again, of art not just being a reaction to or reflection of social conditions, but a contributor to social change.
Yeah, very strategic. And so I love the next one. And so we're going to keep on moving. And I love this one because when we think about immigration, I don't know that all the time people think about it this way. So your thoughts on this one?
So the second point I want to make is about narrative change. We know as lobbyists, as advocates, as organizers, as elected officials, that sometimes social movements and our work can lead to policy and legislative victories. But what happens is when power changes hands, those victories often get rolled back. And I believe it's because the narratives that are underlying progress, the narratives that are underlying these fights, never get exposed. And so this is an image that a French photographer named JR made. He did murals and photographs around the world, large scale like this one. And in the height of the Trump administration, during the family separation policies, JR travels to the US-Mexico border to a town called Tecate and takes a photograph of this baby whose name is Kikito. He took that photograph when Kikito was 1 year old in his crib. And he then asked the mother if it was okay if he blew up Kikito's face and had him look out over the US-Mexico border. So you're looking at a 70-foot high image of Kikito propped up by scaffolding, looking out over the border. And it just, at a time that Trump is talking about Mexicans as in vile terms, as rapists, as thugs, you're looking at an image, a humanitarian image, if you will. And it's not that this one image is going to change anything, but 1 million people saw this image within the first 24 hours, and people started coming there from around the world. So one image, not going to change anything. But it's the idea of narrative power, building upon narratives one after the other. And let's move on to the next slide. I'm just watching the time. I want to talk about this because it's really a question of how artists can subvert things. Many of you know that, particularly those of you or all of you who are in Virginia, that the land is strewn with white Confederate generals looking down at people. And these monuments are made of bronze and stone, so they represent a certain permanence. Oftentimes they're 16 feet tall. And so what Kehinde Wiley did, Kehinde Wiley is the guy that did Obama's portrait that's in the National Portrait Gallery, is he subverted the idea of white supremacists looking down on people and instead put a black horseman with dreadlocks and sneakers up. So now when somebody walks by this monument, they're looking up at a new kind of hero. Again, by itself, not going to change anything, but building a narrative that's consistent with who we are and our values, and the monument that glorifies us as opposed to denigrates us becomes very important.
I love that. And as we progress to probably our last slide, and we'll probably, hopefully you can stay for the after chat and we can see some others. But the reason that I want to hear you talk about this one is because what I think is this may not mean something to everyone, but depending on who your audience is, this is extremely powerful as we think about young Black voters, these audiences that we want to bring into the fold and help them understand where we are in terms of messaging. This is great. I feel really excited about some of the provocative postcards that we did this year. One of them was Black, it was all Black, and it had your vote is private as your uterus should be. And it was really, really powerful. And we sent that out to 18 to 35-year-olds because we wanted them to understand that the vote is private, but also the power of that vote to take care of things that are all about you. Can you talk about this this particular reflection? Because I think it's pretty amazing.
Well, in deference to time, I'll just say one quick thing. This is in a painting. It's a rendering of a photograph that was taken by the San Jose Mercury News by a painter named Nicholas Smith, who put a woman up in front of a police line to try to shift and to shift the narrative again, if you will, from Black Lives Matter, which Trump was labeling as American haters, to reflecting back what precipitated the Black Lives Matter movement, which was the police state. And so this evokes that from us. This calls that out.
Wow. So, Ken, this has been amazing. I was so delighted to have this conversation because I do think that there's an opportunity for us to really lean into art this year in terms of messaging and being really strategic and targeted, because we have the data that helps us and you show us how this all works together. I hope that you will be able to stay for the after chat, and you are going to be my new best friend because I'm so excited about all the work. And I will tell everyone, when I first saw you on Page Gardner, I got the book right away. And so this is my secret weapon to organizing and canvassing and idea sharing for 2024.
So thank you, Fennell. This was kind of a teaser. As you know, we didn't get through half the slides that we had hoped to, but I go on talking probably a little bit too much.
No, we love it. We can go a whole hour just on all those slides. And I want to say that Fennell is so great. We have Creative Mondays where we do talk about how to be creative. And it's so key to our work. And I want to give a shout out. In Virginia, we have a great group, the Art and Activism folks, that have been using art and activism with the pipeline stuff. If you've ever seen their work, they really, a lot of performance work. It reminds me of the days of Laurie Anderson, some of the stuff that we do, they do. But I want to say that I love to see it applied because it's so effective. So thank you for bringing it to light. It's great.
Yeah. And I want to say Georgia Fuller too, because she did a lot of this kind of work. And so it's time for us to just continue to lean in on these opportunities. And to Ken's point, being very strategic about it. So a lot of this is new for me. So that's why I'm so excited.
Well, Georgia Fuller also jumped the White House fence when you could. So that's a different kind of art. So great. So thank you, Ken. Stay with us. And we're excited because not only is it about art spaces, thank you, Fennell, we're talking about state races and the power of the state. So Heather Williams, welcome. If you're just new to the room, she's interim director of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, but in Washington speak, that's the DLCC. And, when I first got into this work, it was sort of like trying to learn acronyms, right? DLL, D whatever, DNC. But anyways, we're glad you're here. So the interim director, are you thinking you're going to be the director of this organization, or let's just talk?
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
I hope so.
But I think, we sit in such an incredible place right now because of all of the work that you all did, right? In Virginia, it was an incredible effort. And I hope you all are so proud of what you delivered. I know for us, it was certainly an incredible privilege to be a part of it. But this all happened on the ground, right?
Right. No idea. Let's get into it. A lot of people may not even know. And I know even for me, getting into this only the last 7 years and knowing what you do and what all the different organizations do. Can you please start with telling us about the genesis of it, and then let's get into what you're doing now in Virginia.
Yeah. So broadly, right, we are the party committee that is responsible for state legislatures across the country. We have the immense privilege of working with incredible people on the ground, our candidates and legislators and leadership and all kinds of groups that care deeply about what is happening in their state capital, where, as we heard, Delegate Tran talk about, the most important legislation is happening, right? The stuff that touches your life every single day is happening in your state capital. And so we get this privilege of really being able to sort of tell the story, right, of what's happening in states, to bring awareness and more attention and resources and all the things that we need to be to ensure that this ballot level, that state houses are seen in our world of politics and government, right, as important as what is happening in Washington. And so that's broadly what we're looking at and what we're doing. And this year, obviously, was an incredible opportunity in Virginia.
Yeah. Well, when you first started, was it in, like, how long have you been around? Because I was just wondering, when we talk about gerrymandering, and we all sort of, as Democrats, woke up to the idea that state legislatures matter. And we realized we just got, kicked to the curb after like 2010. So were you before that how long have you guys been around? And was this like a wake up call for you all?
Yeah. So the DLCC really formed actually out of, for those who remember McCain-Feingold, right, where the party had to release any organization that dealt with the states because it was a non-federal committee. So the Democratic Governors Association, the DLCC, we were sort of out on our own, if you will. And that was earlier, right, in the 2000s. So 2010 happens, right?
No, it's yeah, I mean, it's true. And the 2010, like for all of us, we really woke up to this idea of what you're dealing with now. So what you're dealing with now is gerrymandered states with divided governments. And I'd like to get into that eventually when we talk about the path to the majority, when you're really trying to say, okay, what is our path forward to really make sure that we are winning back some of these red states. And Virginia, as we saw, we did flip everything blue, and you were part of that. And then let's talk about Virginia. So in the sense of your success here, let's talk about what made it successful. You released that memo. Let's just look at the high points of that memo and tell us what you learned, I mean, and applied in Virginia to bring home this win. What were some of those things?
Yeah, Virginia was so interesting, right? Because we ended the 2022 election with Democrats having real success in the states, right? Sort of bucked all the trends and the expectations in a presidential midterm, right? And people really showed up to say, stay out of my body, right? Stay out of my business. Like, this is really serious. And I think, thinking, we were just talking about images, right? And how it evokes emotion and action. What I think we saw with the Dobbs decision as well, right, was it no longer was just a political conversation. Are you for abortion? Are you against it? Right? Pro-life, pro-choice. It actually happened. And I think there were, generations of people who had taken it for granted, right? They thought that it was going to be around forever. It was the law of the land, right? Like, they could talk about it all they wanted. And then, right, the court really did take it away. Republicans took it away, remanded it back to the states, right? And suddenly people were like, well, I must do something about this, right? So headed into Virginia, right? We're like, okay, well, clearly Republicans are going to learn some lessons, right? It's clear that people do not think that abortion should be illegal. Republicans are not going to touch this issue. And lo and behold, right, it was a core issue in Virginia. And, I think we got the incredible privilege, again, to work with just such great folks in Virginia, incredible candidates, an incredible team who was laser focused and so good at having real conversations with voters every single day. And it was through that, right, that we were able to support and engage and, be a partner in making sure that we had the strongest possible plan that had the greatest amount of resources, and that we were continuing to elevate the importance of what was happening in Virginia for potential news outlets and donors who think about races only in the federal on-year sense. So I think it was that collaborative effort that got us to where we are.
Well, I also noticed early, because I know we've been involved in all these elections, that this year, because 2021 was a disaster and on the ground organizing when we saw things happen too late. But what I noticed this year that gave me a lot of really great feeling that we were going to do well was your early investments and early start. Like, I saw our state and House Caucus work together, and I think that, and then became the majority project. So those early investments seem to build that critical infrastructure you're talking about. And, that really helped so much getting started early, right? I mean, that's really key. And then, as you said in the memo, is that megaphone. And I was, when I heard that Youngkin was dropping $1 million on the 15-week abortion ban, I'm like, oh, goody. I was like, he really got, and then later got a little bit of hot water with his own party, that they really felt that him getting into that really lost him some, lost the election. But I'm not, who knows? But what are your thoughts on that when you were able to sort of strategize around what was happening with Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point, right, about early engagement and early investment. We were talking some throughout the show, right, about how Virginia always has elections, right? People are being asked to stay engaged and involved all the time. But we also know, right, that these legislatures are not built on one election at a time, right? It's not one single race, like a governor's race, right? That is going to do it. And so the regular engagement and the build is really important, and being able to make sure that these programs on the ground are supported, not just during the traditional electoral season, but to be able to build the greatest operation with a great team, supporting, right, incredible people who are raising their hand to run for office. So I think that was really critically important. I would like to say that we were surprised that, Republicans and Governor Youngkin were trying to ban abortion, right? But we weren't. We know their playbook now. They're not actually listening to constituents or voters or the people at all, right? They're driving their personal agenda. And what was interesting is you saw the governor and Republicans in Virginia try to test some lightened language about a ban and a compromise. They failed, obviously, right? But I think it was interesting when we think about Virginia as an opportunity to see how tools and tactics have changed as we head into 24. I thought that was interesting. Clearly, it didn't stick for Republicans, so they've got a long road ahead of them as they move into 24. And this issue of not just abortion, but as we've been talking about, freedoms, right? To love who you want to love, to read the books, right? To have your vote counted, to be safe in schools, right? Those things matter. And it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves as we move into 24.
Yeah, and let's talk about, you want, to break the supermajorities. And I think that's so interesting because we do see like states like Wisconsin and that a lot of times what happens is, even though we have, like, let's say, Democratic governor elected, even in Kentucky, we saw the wins in Pennsylvania and some of the Wisconsin Supreme Court wins, that right away, if Republicans have that power, they'll change the law so the governor doesn't have the power, especially if it's going to be a Democratic party. They just race and do this kind of nonsense. So what are you, so heading into, let's talk about your strategies now, how to break, what you're looking at to break the supermajority. What is that secret around that? And then thinking about 2024 and this 50 state idea, it must be like pivoting all the time because so much is going on. I don't know how you keep on top of every state. Talk about some of those plans to break those. What does that look like? And then going into this election, what are you thinking that's going to be this unifying, if possible, 50 state initiative to get to sort of win the presidential?
Yeah. Well, I would start by saying we have an incredible team, right, who are having conversations and really diving into what's happening in these states. Our responsibility as the party committee is to make sure that we understand what is happening and that the nuances of states, right, still matter. Of course, we're enveloped, right, in this national narrative, and you can't escape it, but that doesn't mean that the nuances happening in states don't matter. And so we really attend to that. The governor's veto, has been something that we've thought about a lot for a long time, actually. When you think about what it means to build power in the state and in a state house, it's not like a governor where you either have party or you don't, right? You're in the majority or the minority. And within that, depending on the state, you've got different moments at which you gain some power, right? So 2/3, which is kind of the standard, although it's not everywhere, for having a governor to have veto power. Well, in a state that's very gerrymandered, like Wisconsin, like North Carolina, like Kansas, you've got Democratic governors and a Republican, right, legislature. Right. And so thinking about that kind of first rung, right, under these maps, it's hard to create a Democratic majority in this election today. But what we can do is take advantage of it and make sure that that Democratic governor has the veto pen. I'm sure many of you remember reading about what happened in North Carolina this summer with the party switcher. Terrible, right? And to your point, the first thing Republicans did was ban abortion, right? Like right out of the gate, there is immediate action to preserve power and to ban abortion. And so we really know that it's important that we're empowering these governors to protect our rights while we build power, continue to build power in the state house. So that's broadly kind of, what we're looking at.
Well, that's good. And lastly, when you do this is just a question that our team's been talking about when we're trying to figure out like who makes all these decisions. Like when you come into Virginia and you work with the candidates, is it their teams that make the decisions, like how much digital ad, how much TV ad? Because what we're working on next when we're doing all this debriefing with all the candidates and the campaigns, where we didn't win, where we felt like we should have won, and where do we come close, is how much money was spent. We see millions and millions of dollars in some races. Some won, some we came really close, we could have invested more. How do you make those decisions? And then what we see too is some of this lot of TV ad buy. What are you thinking moving forward on strategies when we think some of this money could have been used better than just running all these TV ads that maybe were too much or too many mailers? How does that work out? Like who decides all that strategy? And is that the right way, like all that TV ad buy?
That's an interesting question. We are able and have the privilege, to partner with senior campaign folks, in states, and are working, arm in arm to figure out what is the, best strategy and sort of the best plan. We know without question that having candidates have real conversation with voters, whether it's on the door or on the phone or in community meetings, is really critically important. We learned that in 2020 when we couldn't do that, and it was reinforcement that the fundamentals, particularly at this ballot level, where these candidates and electeds still very much live in their communities, they're still very active, and they go to the grocery store, and they're surrounded by constituents. And so knowing that that is really critically important, you're thinking about how do you communicate with all of the different, factions of people that you need to talk to, that you're, getting your message out. And it is layered, you think about the digital, as you said, mail, TV, etc. I think we're always trying to learn, what meets a voter where they are today, as technology and deliverability and access, changes as people stream versus watch cable versus, read the mail. And so it's really dynamic. I don't know that I could ever say that there is a perfect formula or we're going to find it. But what I think I would say is always trying to evolve that and make sure that we're reaching the voters that are most important for the election where they're at. And as we move to 24, different than Virginia, of course, where the legislature was the top of the ticket, we have a very crowded environment to communicate with folks, with all of the Senate and gubernatorial and, of course, the presidential race on the ballot. So thinking about how best to communicate about what's happening in the state house and what is happening with these incredible folks who are raising their hand to run for office will be part of the formula.
Yeah, I know. It's just sort of, we're trying to figure that out too. If there's a way to we as grassroots people to do stuff with not a lot of money, we know that it isn't always the answer. We saw candidates come really close without the money, and other places were overly invested and then didn't win even then. So we need to work on that. I want to say thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, because as my team said, we want to always make new friends and work together. And I think moving forward, it's going to be really important to have a good relationship with your team. So thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you. This is amazing.
Yeah. So thank you. So we're going to wrap up and go to the after chat. Fennell, come on up. Let's talk about real quick before we go over. I want to thank everybody for being here, and you got to stay for the after chat. Ken's going to stick around. It looks like Heather may be there. And thank you if you supported the show. Did anybody put anything in your cup for now? Did you look in there?
No, my cup doesn't have anything in it.
What are you talking about? Your Patreon? Yeah. Okay. So we
do have a new Patreon.
Kathy Snyder has something in it.
Yay! Ring the bell. Who is our new patron? Yay! Ding ding.
Kathy Snyder. So
Kathy
yay,
Snyder.
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's really great. We know on Giving Tuesday, we're laughing at how many people were doing Giving Tuesday. We're like, we didn't put anything out because we just really rely on what we deliver to folks in the room and people that know our grassroots work,
Exactly. And I will say what I always say for these meetings every Friday with the heart and soul that we all put into it is that weekly meetings build solidarity. And that is what's going to be so important for us to carry through 2024. Every single one of us has something that we do that makes all of this stuff work. So I'm so excited. Great show today. I'm so
thrilled. Working together. I want to remind people next week, Abigail Spanberger, the Congresswoman, will be joining us. And we are also, Robin, I'm blanking on Maria's name, but it's gun policy. She's an expert on that. Robin's really good at keeping me. We have three great guests. I'm looking for her. Like, Robin, who are those great guests?
The great guests are Mara Elliott, who's the city attorney of San Diego, who's going to talk about the connection with gun violence restraining orders as well as sexual assault. And then we have Bonnie Stable from GMU, one of our favorite people to talk about gender policy.
Gender policy, Bonnie Stable from George Mason. That's going to be a great conversation, and Abigail Spanberger. And then we're just going to keep rolling. And so let's roll over to the credits. Thank you to our awesome team today. Thank you for everything. Let's roll into the after chat and get your sweatshirt.